Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Midday Discourse. I'm Uyag Mofwegbe, and we're just winding down on 2023, and we're taking a look at some of the big events of this year as it comes to a close. We've talked about several things about Nigeria and the big events, the highlights, especially beginning with the election. However, there's one big, if you like, a very big event within the West African sub-region, which is the coup that took place on the 26th of July in Niger Republic. Now, following that coup, we understand that the president, Mohamed Bazoum, who had been ousted, was also detained. We now know that himself, his wife, and his son have been in house arrest since that coup happened, and this is virtually 5 months down the line. In the middle of all that, we've seen ECOWAS make efforts, including impose sanctions, all aimed at ensuring that two things happen. One, that President Bazoum is reinstated, and of course, that means that the junta will also have to vacate office. But that just hasn't happened yet. As a matter of fact, the coup plotters continue to promise and reassure that they will transition into a military if you like, civil rule. That, again, is yet to be seen. Tonight, we'll take a look at how these sanctions are biting Niger as a country and its economy, and then other developments that we have seen following these very nasty incidents. I'm joined by my colleague and our foreign affairs correspondent here at Global Television, Queen Agaba, to quickly take a look at some of these developments. Queen, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. I mean, you and I have talked about Niger a while off camera, but this is particularly troubling given the fact that it's been 5 months and it doesn't seem like this will end anytime soon. What have been your concerns with regards to this coup?
Okay, my concerns as regards this coup is we quite know that Niger is ranked one of the poorest countries in the world.
Right.
You know, with all of the economic challenges that are being faced by the country, and then the coup, you see the deteriorating economy in Niger. You see all of this come into play. You see the
Economic Community of West African States.
West African states,
that's ECOWAS
sidelining, you know, the Niger Republic, and then, you know, bringing down their GDP, and all of this it's been troubling, knowing that all of these events, you know, have been happening.
Right.
It's sad. It's really sad.
You know, I mean, I think about this myself, and I'm wondering, because I've followed events around Africa and, of course, West Africa in particular, and you see how coups have merged otherwise promising governments. Today is Burkina Faso, tomorrow is Mali, the day that follows is Niger Republic, and then even beyond the West African sub-region. However, as part of the aftermath of the coup, experts and those who follow international policies have been concerned particularly about the role of ECOWAS. Questions like whether or not ECOWAS has done the needful under these circumstances or not have also been on the front burner. But then we understand ECOWAS, like you mentioned quite brilliantly, has imposed several sanctions on Niger as a country. Just share your thoughts around those developments.
Okay, so for the ECOWAS, I feel the ECOWAS should have, you know, obviously they've given them, you know, time, you know, they've given them, we've had cases where they were given 1 week to reconsider, you know, reinstating Bazoum back in office, you know, and calls for dialogue and all of this. But the junta have been keen. It's more like, obviously it was premeditated, and they've been keen on, you know, just having a coup. So it's more like a strong head, and quite frankly, I think the ECOWAS has been, I must commend the ECOWAS. For the leadership role. For their leadership role, that, you know.
I understand. As it turns out, incidentally, is our president, Bola Tinubu, who also is the chairman of ECOWAS, and we've seen the kind of leadership. I mean, recall that he was in Guinea-Bissau a few months ago, just before, I think about 2 weeks before the coup, and he did say that going forward, the leadership of ECOWAS will not tolerate coups, all right? Will not tolerate all these, if you like, these unconventional, unconstitutional ways of taking over government. I mean, anybody who must come into government, especially to become the president or to lead a nation, must come through a totally constitutional means. But he had barely finished that when the coup happened in the Niger Republic. But I also want us to talk about how that, as of today, for instance, we understand that the last, what some persons might call the remnants of the troop, the French troop in Niger Republic would have left by the end of today, Friday. I mean, this is 22nd of December. And it's also very instructive to know that this troop had been responsible primarily for fighting Boko Haram in particular and insurgency of all kinds in general, you know, around the sub-region. Added to that, this coup has now strained the relationship between France and Niger Republic. Let's look at those elements quickly.
Okay, you know, France happens to be the colonial masters of
That's
Niger
right. Mm-hmm.
Republic. And, you know, these troops leaving Niger it also poses as a challenge for countries, even in that sub-region, because
including Nigeria, of course.
Including Nigeria, we are at risk as well, because we understand the importance of this troop in the countries and the sub-regions, the countries, you know, that are
around the sub-region, right?
The sub-regions. And then this coup leaving Niger, leaving, you know, it's a great threat for us. So we most likely will have cases of insurgencies. We'll have cases of, we're not even looking at the, we're not looking at some of the consequences of
this coup.
It's not just affecting Niger alone,
Right.
It's affecting countries in the sub-region, and it's posing as a threat to, you know, countries in this sub-region.
Interesting, exactly, that's the point. I'm sure, you see, international politics and diplomacy can be very interesting, at the same time very intricate. The leaders of the countries within the sub-region and even beyond are not just concerned because they want to save Nigeria per se, which is of course very important, but they also know that what touches one, as we say, touches all. But we can't just forget quickly the reasons that the military, I mean the coup plotters had advanced for being basis for the coup. They said the president, Mohamed Bazoum, had mismanaged the country. Let's be very clear. Those who led this coup are members of his inner circle. So they are not people who came from outside. You may say, yes, well, as is always the case, there was some external interference. However, those who masterminded it, the foot soldiers on the ground, are those who were in his inner circle. So what's the reason they gave for the coup? I mean, chief amongst them is that the president had been mismanaging the economy, and as such, they wanted to do better with it. They also said the president had not properly managed or fought insurgency in the country and by extension the sub-region, because there's a cooperation between the Niger Republic, Nigeria, and Chad, all right, to fight Boko Haram and all kinds of criminality, whether it's banditry or what have you, within the sub-region. And added to that, we're not hearing, we don't know how true it is. I mean, Global TV cannot authoritatively confirm that, but we're now hearing that since they took over, uranium, the price of uranium has moved from $2 to $200. How true that is left to be authenticated or confirmed. But it's interesting to know that every time there's a coup, especially in Africa, or in particular in West Africa sub-region, the excuse is always that the government has been irresponsible, the government has been corrupt, the government has not been able to manage the affairs of the country, and so on and so forth. It's worrying, because this is what I want you to respond to, quite frankly. It's worrying how that Niger Republic now, I mean this particular group of coup plotters, have moved on to cement a sort of multilateral tie with Burkina Faso and Mali. And the aim basically is that should one of us get attacked, the other two countries will come to their rescue, and we do that for each other. So they owe themselves that kind of obligation. Do you not think this, again, makes the threat of coups more troubling?
Yes, it does. Burkina Faso and Mali have also, you know, received sanctions and
from ECOWAS,
obviously. And then it is more like, it's not even a coup for just a country. It's becoming regional.
Right.
We see that, okay, these people are now, it's becoming a coup between countries, and it is quite troubling.
Right.
Interestingly, it is troubling, and we also see that these countries, like you quite mentioned, some of the, the challenges that are being faced. You see that the GDP, as of recently, we see that new infrastructure woes. Nigeria that supplied 71% of electricity before the coup. We halted the service. We also see cases of in the capital of
Niger.
You see that companies can today meet between quarter and half of demand across the country,
Right.
according to the World Bank. And then, several infrastructure projects have been halted. The challenges are heightened, not even just for Niger alone, but for countries in that
Region.
in that sub-region.
You see, it's interesting to add to that real quick, because those are very salient points you have raised now. Well, I mean, as of October, we had even heard that there were challenges as to whether or not the military coup plotters, or the military government, as we would like to call them for the sake of this conversation, would be able to pay November salary. In addition to the reports coming out of Niger Republic that banks were now having to work half day because they didn't even have enough cash, all right, to meet obligation. I mean, transactions, people coming to collect money, and so on and so forth. That goes to tell you how bad it has become on account of the coup. But again, we need to be very clear about something. When ECOWAS started rolling out, announcing sanctions against Niger, there were people who said, well, why is it that Niger is so much of a priority for ECOWAS? Why didn't they do the same with Burkina Faso? Why didn't they do the same with Mali, and so on and so forth? But we also need to appreciate the fact that Niger, like every other country around the world, has its peculiarities, all right? It's very evident that ECOWAS is also dealing with this group of military men and the kind of system they set up in that country on the basis of the uniqueness of the circumstances that led to this coup in the first instance. But I want us to come down to the fact that it's been virtually 5 months now since after the coup. There has not been a specific announcement or a specific roadmap as to how the junta intends to transition power to a civil rule. For example, there's no timeline. There is no, if you like, specific arrangement in terms of how elections will be conducted, like we saw in 1999 when we had former military head of state, General Abubakar, retired, who at that time was the military head of state, having taken over from the late General Sani Abacha, and we saw how that transitioned to a military government in 1999, bringing former President Obasanjo into office. So we have not seen those specific plans that Nigerians and indeed the world can look at and say, okay, we know by this time and this time there would have been a transition to civil rule. Isn't that also
troubling? And I was going to ask, how effective have coups been in Africa, judging from the coups that we had in Nigeria, in the history
of Nigeria, which have also set us back.
Yes, which has also set us back. How effective are these coups? One thing that I've been bordering on is how effective are these coups, because we see that whenever there's a coup, you see that there's a drastic reduction in the productivity of the economy, in the GDP, even we see closures of borders, just like it's happening in Niger. Basically, businesses are being stalled. You see that one of the challenges that is happening right now in Niger is the availability of cash. We hear that taxpayers would now have to pay cash, instead of having to
do maybe electronic
transactions. Some of those hitches. And so how effective are these coups? What do you think, what are your thoughts as regards?
I'll tell you something, Queen. Coups are very nasty in their very own nature. First of all, they are drastic, they are extreme, they are unconventional. Of course, needless to say, they are unconstitutional. Added to that, coups disrupt and otherwise, if you like, constitutional governments. For example, President Mohamed Bazoum was democratically elected. You may have a problem with the process that produced him, but there's also a constitutional way of getting around that. However, he has been removed violently, he has been removed unconstitutionally. So that has again created a very nasty disruption in the governance of Niger Republic. So it has brought in military. Second, it has also thwarted economic progress. So whatever progress you had recorded while you had the president, Bazoum there, has now been halted. All right, because first we need to understand for context that several companies, big companies, multinationals have left Niger Republic, most of them owned by, by the French authorities. So all of these have had their toll on Niger Republic. But as we wrap up now, I'm sure that what we should agitate our minds about is, one, what exactly is the plan of this junta to bring about civil rule so that Niger will make progress as a country, and indeed the sub-region will also progress. I want to thank you especially, Queen Agaba, our Foreign Affairs correspondent, for coming on the program.
Many thanks, Mr. Lee, for having me.
All right, great. So that's our program on Midday Discourse, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Uyag Mofwegwe. I'll be back here very soon.